Jeff Bezos kickstarted the e-commerce revolution and grown Amazon into one of the world's most widely recognized and influential brands, while also working to create Earth's most customer-centric company. The company started as an online bookstore in 1994. As Amazon grew, the company began to spread into different retail offerings. That started with the sale of music and movies, which led to sporting goods, home improvement items, and eventually the introduction of third-party sellers. Amazon launched its successful Prime service in 2005. Jeff Bezos revealed recently that the company had reached a whopping 200 million Prime members. The business that would launch Amazon's profits into the stratosphere was its Amazon Web Services. Launched in 2006, the commercial cloud platform gives third-party companies access to the computing power and resources needed to run their online businesses without dumping money into their own hardware. And it's been a cash cow for Amazon. He is a once-in-a-generation leader who has created a brand that lives at the intersection of algorithm and aspiration. He single-handedly drove the success of much of the e-commerce industry. Let's look at Jeff Bezos' top 10 rules for business success.
I wanted to be a theoretical physicist, and so I went to Princeton, and I was a really good student, as I pointed out already. I got A+s on almost everything. I was in the honors physics track, which starts out with 100 students, and by the time you get to quantum mechanics, it's like 30. So I'm in quantum mechanics. I think this is like junior year, and I've also been taking a bunch of computer science classes and electrical engineering classes, which I'm also enjoying. And I can't solve this partial differential equation. It's really, really hard. And I've been studying with my roommate, Joe, who also is really good at math. And the two of us worked on this one homework problem for 3 hours and got nowhere. And we finally said, we looked up at each other over the table at the same moment. We said, Yo Santa. Because Yo Santa was the smartest guy at Princeton. And we went to Yosanta's room, and he was Sri Lankan. And in the Facebook, which was an actual paper book at that time, his name was 3 lines long, because I guess in Sri Lanka, when you do something good for the king, they give you an extra syllable on your name. And so he had a super long last name, the most humble, wonderful guy. And we show him this problem. And he looks at it, he stares at it for a while, and he says, cosine. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, that's the answer. And I'm like, that's the answer? And he's like, yeah, let me show you. So he brings us into his room. He sits us down. He writes out 3 pages of detailed algebra. Everything crosses out, and the answer is cosine. And I said, listen, Yo Santa, did you just do that in your head? And he said, no, that would be impossible. 3 years ago, I solved a very similar problem, and I was able to map this problem onto that problem, and then it was immediately obvious that the answer was cosine. And that was an important moment for me, because that was the very moment when I realized I was never going to be a great theoretical physicist. I go to bed early, I get up early, I like to putter in the mornings. I like to read the newspaper, I like to have coffee, I like to have breakfast with my kids before they go to school. So I have my kind of puttering time is very important to me. And so that's why I set my first meeting for 10 o'clock. I like to do my high IQ meetings before lunch. Like anything that's going to be really mentally challenging, that's a 10 o'clock meeting. And because by 5 p.m., I'm like, I can't think about that today. Let's try this again tomorrow at 10 a.m. I get 8 hours of sleep. I prioritize it. Unless I'm traveling in different time zones, sometimes it's impossible, but I am very focused on it. And for me, I need 8 hours of sleep. I think better. I have more energy. My mood is better, all these things. And think about it. As a senior executive, what do you really get paid to do? As a senior executive, you get paid to make a small number of high-quality decisions. Your job is not to make thousands of decisions every day. Is that really worth it if the quality of those decisions might be lower because you're tired or grouchy or any number of things? Now, it's different if it's a startup company. I mean, you're really when Amazon was 100 people,
Oh.
it's a different story, but Amazon's not a startup company. Why do I need to make 100 decisions today? If I make like 3 good decisions a day, that's enough. And they should just be as high quality as I can make them. I went to my boss and said to him, I'm going to go do this crazy thing, and I'm going to start this company selling books online. And this is something that I had already been talking to him about in a sort of more general context. But then he said, let's go on a walk. And we went on a 2-hour walk in Central Park in New York City. And the conclusion of that was this. He said, this actually sounds like a really good idea to me. But it sounds like it would be a better idea for somebody who didn't already have a good job. And he convinced me to think about it for 48 hours before making a final decision. And so I went away and was trying to find the right framework in which to make that kind of big decision. And I'd already talked to my wife about this, and she was very supportive and said, look, you can count me in 100%. Whatever you want to do. It's true. She had married this kind of, fairly stable guy in a stable career path, and now he wanted to go do this crazy thing, but she was 100% supportive. So it really was a decision that I had to make for myself. And the framework I found, which made the decision incredibly easy, was what I called, which only a nerd would call, a regret minimization framework. So I wanted to project myself forward to age 80 and say, okay, now I'm looking back on my life. I want to have minimized the number of regrets I have. And I knew that when I was 80, I was not going to regret having tried this. I was not going to regret having wanted, trying to participate in this thing called the internet that I thought was going to be a really big deal. I knew that if I failed, I wouldn't regret that. But I knew the one thing I might regret is not ever having tried. And I knew that that would haunt me every day. So when I thought about it that way, it was an incredibly easy decision. If you can project yourself out to age 80 and sort of think, what will I think at that time? It gets you away from some of the daily pieces of confusion. I left this Wall Street firm in the middle of the year. When you do that, you walk away from your annual bonus. And that's the kind of thing that in the short term can confuse you. But if you think about the long term, then you can really make good life decisions that you won't regret later.
A young person starting their career, I think there are probably a lot of things. Some of them are very well known and people have heard them many times. They're still true. One of those that you should always focus on, a young person should find something that they're passionate about to do. And that's not going to surprise anyone. It's a clear thing to do. It's very hard. If you don't love your work, you're never going to be great at it. I think the other thing I would suggest to any young person, even before they start their career, is to really think about their choices. Because I find young people, and I when I was young, I made this mistake too. You can get very fixed on your gifts. So everybody has gifts. You have gifts and you have things that you didn't get gifted. Maybe you're extremely beautiful. Maybe you're extremely good at mathematics. There are a lot of things that you can be given. But those things can confuse you because they're not the things that construct your life. It's your choices that construct your life, not your gifts. You can celebrate your gifts. Be proud of them. Be happy of them. Actually, don't be proud of them. Be celebratory of them, but you can't be proud because they're gifts. They were given to you. You didn't earn them. You can only be proud of the things you earn. And so, as I got older, I started to realize I wasn't proud of my gifts. I was always good at school. School was always easy for me. And I was always proud that I was a great student. I got A's in all my classes. I was good at math, all of that. And I thought that's who I was. But it's not true. Those are the things that are gifts. What was hard for me is deciding to work hard, deciding to use my gifts in certain ways, to challenge myself, to do things that I didn't think I could do, to put myself in uncomfortable situations. We all I would say to a young person, You can choose a life of ease and comfort, or you can choose a life of service and adventure. Which one of those, when you're 90 years old, are you going to be more proud of?
All of our senior executives operate the same way I do. They work in the future, they live in the future. None of the people who report to me should really be focused on the current quarter. I always tell people, sometimes I get, we'll have a good quarterly conference call or something, and Wall Street will like our quarterly results, and people will stop me and say, congratulations on your quarter, and I say, thank you. But what I'm really thinking is, that quarter was baked 3 years ago. Right now, I'm working on a quarter that's going to reveal itself in 2021 sometime. And that's what you need to be doing. You need to be out sort of, 2 or 3 years in advance. We only have a few principles at Amazon, kind of core values that we go back to over and over again. And if you looked at each of the things that we do, you would see those run straight through everything. So the first one, and by far the most important one, is customer obsession. And we talk about it as customer obsession as opposed to competitor obsession. And I have seen over and over again companies talk about that they're customer focused, but really when I pay close attention to them, I believe they are competitor focused. And that's just a completely different mentality. By the way, competitor focus can work. But I don't think it works in the long run as well as customer focused. For one thing, once you're the leader, if your whole culture is competitor obsessed, it's kind of hard to stay energized and motivated if you're out in front. Whereas customers are always unsatisfied. They're always discontent. They always want more. And so no matter how far you get out there in front of your competitors, you're still behind your customers. So they're always pulling you along. So customer obsession is a deep principle that underlies everything we do.
People have very high standards for how they want their work life to be. If you can get your work life to be where you enjoy half of it, that is amazing. Because very few people ever achieve that. Because the truth is, everything comes with overhead. That's reality. Everything comes with pieces that you don't like. You could be a Supreme Court justice, and there's still going to be pieces of your job you don't like. You can be a university professor, and it's still going to be, you have to go to committee meetings, and you have to do every job comes with pieces you don't like. And we need to say, that's part of it. And not resent those pieces, or try not to, but also try to minimize them. I tell senior executives, you should have the least stress. There's this weird, I think, false idea that CEOs, I'm a CEO, there's this false idea that CEOs are under the most stress. Well, I look at that, I'm like, why? You're in charge. Why don't you delegate the stress? It's your choice. And so you have to figure out how to set up your life in such a way that you can minimize the things. And I find people don't dislike hard work. What people dislike is being out of control. Like they can't control their life. They can't control their environment. This happens to me when I get overscheduled. I hate being overscheduled. I want some time to be able to think and free myself. We all have the same amount of time in the world. Nobody has more time than anybody else. And when you become a very successful person, one of the things, you start to get overscheduled. You have this event. You had to agree to do this. And maybe last night you were like, why did I agree to do this? I have to go on stage tomorrow. I wish I were really with my family. And, or I hope maybe not this case. Let's say that you like this one. But in general, that kind of thing happens. And so you have to guard your time and try to stay a little bit flexible. So that's, for me, it's not a waste of time, but I like to have some freedom of movement rather than having every minute of every day scheduled.
Number one thing that has made us successful by far is obsessive, compulsive focus on the customer as opposed to obsession over the competitor. And I talk so often to other CEOs and some other CEOs and also founders and entrepreneurs, and I can tell that even though they're talking about customers, they're really focusing on competitors. And it is a huge advantage to any company if you can stay focused on your customer instead of your competitor. So then you have to identify who is your customer. So at the Washington Post, for example, is the customer the people who buy advertisements from us? No, the customer is the reader. Full stop. The customer is the reader. By the way, where do advertisers want to be? Advertisers want to be where there are readers. So it's really not that complicated. You know, it comes around really well. If the stock is up 10% this month, don't feel 10% smarter, because when the stock is down 10% some month, you're going to have to feel 10% dumber, and it's not going to feel as good. We give most of our compensation is done in terms of stock compensation. Part and parcel with ownership is a mentality of long-term thinking. Owners think longer term than renters do. I have a friend who rented his house to some tenants, and instead of getting a Christmas tree stand at Christmas, they just nailed the Christmas tree into the hardwood floors of the house. No owner would ever do that. That's a bad tenant. You know, they're good tenants, but that's a bad tenant. And it's because, you know, this is the same old thing about, you know, nobody ever washed a rental car. You take better care of the things that you own. And definitely deep inside the Amazon culture is to think about the fundamentals of the business and not the daily fluctuations in the stock price.